name is Lari. I'm from McKinsey Company, a senior partner. I've had a privileged career in McKinsey, so I've worked on all 3 continents as a senior partner. So I lived the last 5 years in Asia, was working with the Asian technology companies and enterprises. I now live in US, in Seattle, and before that in Europe. What we do is that we do 2 types of work. Number 1, we work with technology companies on actually their technology, how to drive the adoption, how to drive the acceleration of that. Second, we work with enterprises on how they adopt the technology and how they get the benefits of it. And what I wanted to talk today about is that how do we see the coming years when it comes to generative AI? And what does it mean for you, whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor? And I'll cover that very briefly. And after that, we have a very exciting panel with Umesh as well as Ashish. So let's go forward. Can I have the presentation on, please? So when we look at the technological change, it's no surprise to you. We've talked about it quite a bit, but we see generative AI as a really foundational technology. I'll show you a few facts. But what has changed dramatically, even in the existing enterprise landscape, is the time frame. Everything you see today, and I think most of you have seen it, is about technology acceleration. And if we look at back into 2017, we came out with the Attention is All You Need research paper, which actually our friend Ashish, who will soon be here, was one of the co-writers of. What has happened is that in the last 18 months, since October 22, when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, we've had an explosion of technology. The latest ones being, and you might have heard of this, we had Claude 3 coming out yesterday from Anthropic. We had a couple weeks back Sora from OpenAI, and before that, we had Gemini 1.5. And we will have plenty more in the coming weeks, coming months. In other words, I think the way technology is enabling things is speeding up, and the change is quite dramatic. What that basically has meant is that for enterprises, the way they've started to adopt this technology is faster than ever. And I use this example to make it a bit highlighted where we are. So we're 2 years into generative AI for enterprise usage. The adoption, yes, it is still low. It is about 3% of enterprise spend, but it's about 10 times higher than it was for software as a service originally. It's good to keep this in mind. So when we talk about generative AI, it is not anymore a phenomenon that only consumers or individuals use, you subscribing to ChatGPT or you subscribing to Midjourney, but it's a real phenomenon that enterprises are putting money on. And when we look to the future, we see that this spend is dramatically increasing. And our debates as McKinsey is that is 10% enough in 2 years, or will it be even higher? When we didn't think about the adoption and where that spend is going towards, let's take a look back. Only 3 years ago, like if you go to the 2020, 2022 timeframe, I would say that we were in a proof of concept land. Proof of concept meaning that if you roll back or go back to that time, we had GPT-3. What was being done with GPT-3? Few early trials where we augmented certain processes, usually around customer service, content generation, everything you see today, but they were trials. Since end of 2022, so pretty much a year, I think we dramatically changed the way we do content generation. And all of you see that. We generate better expertise, we generate visual content at the moment, and so forth. These applications are now entering the corporate sphere. Finally, I think what we see is that when you look at this year and you look at next year, 2 things are happening on the larger picture. One is that multimodality is coming. Like said, we already are generating quite impressive videos with Sora that came out a couple weeks back. But more importantly, I think where a lot of the money lies and a lot of the impact is around what is called agents and flows. Meaning, how do we start to automate a lot of the processes that are driving our societies and driving the enterprises? So how do we rethink workflows? How do we build autonomous agents for those? And interestingly, I think Ashish and Umesh will both actually represent their stories. Ashish, for example, is building a general purpose enterprise workflow automation, and he will share his vision on what he's doing. Umesh, on the other hand, is doing this in a conversational space. So how do we reinvent customer interactions? But if you think about the work here, there's quite a lot of jobs and impact that can be created. Beyond, we think that it's a phenomenal era also for the years to come. And it might seem far-fetching, but we're literally talking of 2 to 5 year horizon. What is coming? Number one, AI native software. What AI native software means is that if you think of today's enterprise is being run on an ERP, enterprise resource planning system. What ERP is basically, it's the operating system of a company. ERPs determine the processes that corporates work on, and you know the companies, SAPs, Oracles of the world. What is happening right now is that all of that software is being reconfigured to be AI first. What it means to be AI first is actually to rethink the workflows, so the core process underneath, to rethink the UX, the user interfaces, to be AI first, etc. Once those get into implementation, that will have dramatic implications to how organizations are being run globally. Second, that will lead to AI native organizations. Already now, there is talk that if you're a VC, so if you're an investor here, or if you're an entrepreneur, who creates the first one-man unicorn? So I think there's serious discussions around how do we build companies around agents rather than building them around teams. And what does even the team of a future mean? In a corporate landscape, this will be different because a lot of our society is running on different type of organizations. But what we mean by this is that similarly as we went through a transformation with digital, we will go through a transformation in AI, but this time the process affected will not be only repeatable processes, but it will be also knowledge work, and it will be decision making, etc. So the leadership structures of companies look differently. And finally, we will have embodied AI towards the end of the decade and next decade. Embodied AI meaning robots, be it them humanoid form or other form. So the change coming is drastic. I think one could say it's larger than we've ever faced. And we as McKinsey believe that that will create huge opportunities and will be coming soon. So just to look at a bit the magnitude. So for any one of us, 80% of the workforce, so 80% of us in the room, probably actually more of us in this room, will have significant part of their job touched upon AI. This could be augmenting what we are doing, or it could be replacing part of the tasks we're doing. Our estimate is that about 50% of all tasks in the society today, please notice of everything the combined workforce does, can be done at a same or better level than being done today with the technologies we have inside. So that's a huge amount of work. And up to 70% of all knowledge work will be significantly impacted by Gen AI. And where these numbers are coming from is that we actually, as did with our Global Institute, which is a non-profit research think tank, we did quite an extensive research over 3 years into what is the task level automation we can drive. So what this implies is the following. So if we look at the total monetary potential, to give you a reference point, the GDP globally is about $100 trillion. That's the global GDP. I think US stands somewhere a bit below 30, 25 to 30. We see that there's value worth of the US economy being created in the coming years to the global economy. So about $25 trillion. Of this number, 15 billion comes from classical applications of AI. Another about 8 billion comes from Gen AI. which is a 50% increase over what we actually saw still a year ago. So important to keep in mind that in the last year, we have increased this figure by 50%, so from 15 billion to 25. So in other words, it sounds big, but the opportunity is very real, and we believe it's coming. If we then look at the Gen AI potential, where does it come from? Answer is everywhere, all the functions you can imagine. Number one, on the upper left-hand corner, you see sales and marketing. We believe there's a significant transformation of the way we interact with our customers across different functions. So if previously companies had outbound call centers, we had field forces on sales, a lot of this will get transformed. And of course, we still need human interactions, but if we think about, for example, consumer-facing industries, or even if we think B2B and how we identify opportunities, address those, there is a huge opportunity for change here. Second, software engineering. I think you might have heard it, but there's a famous saying that the world could use 10 times more software than we have today. I think generative AI can be a huge unlock there. And that will create new industries, but it will also change existing industries. Product R&D. Good example is classical manufacturing industries that manufacture goods. We're already starting to today use generative AI to optimize product designs, optimize product cost, or just the effectiveness of the design. So I think we'll start to see across industries quite transformative effects to what the products we use, all the way from medicine to physical goods, what they are and how they function, and so forth. So pretty much we see as McKinsey that across industries, all the functions are at play. On the adoption, interestingly, we were still a year ago saying that maybe the adoption, all of this will happen around 2045. So that's the point where 50% of the activities are earliest automated. And the reason was being that what we look at when we estimate these, we actually look at how fast corporates can adopt technology. What are the classical adoption curves? What has happened in the last year is that the adoption curves have moved from 2040 to the earliest point being at around 2030. The average is still a bit higher. But in other words, it's not only technology acceleration that we're seeing, but we're seeing acceleration in the way corporates adopt the technology, which is an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity if you're investing, or it's an opportunity if you are building your company. So let's then look at the opportunity. And let's do some simple math. So I said earlier, the opportunity for Gen AI is up to 8 billion. Here, 5 to 8 thousand billion USD. We could assume that we capture about 40% of this opportunity by 2030. And if we can monetize 20% of the impact created, meaning if let's say we automate a task, can we actually create software TAM worth of 20%? That translates to about $500 billion of new software TAM being created in the next 6 years. Give you a reference point, I think the global software TAM today is somewhere around 900 billion USD. So in other words, we are creating up to 70% of new TAM for the software industry, where Gen AI belongs, in the next 6 years. So it's quite an unparalleled opportunity if we just think about the growth we're facing. How will this then get divided? And I think here's an important learning here. Number one, a lot of the spend will go to the platforms. I think we're all seeing it, we're all feeling it. A good example is that when I said earlier that there's those companies that were created in 2020 to 2022 timeframe, many of them utilizing GPT-3, probably 98% of the companies do not exist anymore today, because a lot of that functionality has been moved to the platforms. That trend will continue. So it's very important to know where to invest. And the platforms take a lot of the spend. Similarly, as in the cloud era, we moved from infrastructure to more platform as a service, and so forth. However, we are big believers that there will be as big of a pie for vertical and point solutions. And what we mean by vertical and point solutions is that the downside of a mega platform is that they cannot be specific. They can't be customized for specific use cases. And a lot of the opportunity in Gen AI lies in actually how do we capture the impact and how are we very specific with that. And then finally, there's custom development on top. Before we call Umesh and Ashish, I wanted to leave you with 5 thoughts. $500 billion opportunity, Cambrian explosion, signaling that I think it's an unprecedented time in terms of birth of companies, but also the rotation speed of companies. So the uncertainty is large. And as you invest, or as you think about starting your company, there's 5 thoughts I have. 1, how do we move from very singular use cases, doing a very specific task, to more owning a domain? Domain could be an industry, or it could be a particular part of the value chain in the industry. But how do we actually reimagine bigger aspects we play in and move away from the single use case side? Second, I think a lot of companies are focusing on proof of concepts. I think the time for proof of concepts in Gen AI is over. We're moving to proof of value. What I mean by proof of value is that what really matters is that what is the impact we can get out of the technology? And Umesh will talk about it later. Third, how do we actually show scalable implementation and monetization? What you're hopefully taking out of this presentation is a lot of the potential lies in the enterprise field. How do we monetize that? And how do we scale fast? Fourth, how do we play in the ecosystem world? How do we play with partnerships? Because if you believe that the opportunity lies in enterprises, what is our channel? Who actually implements it? How do we get to those thousands of companies? And finally, how do we almost like reframe the thinking of what it means to invest and build a company? Going from the world where, 5 years ago we were investing for instant successes, how do we go to invest to a 5 to 10 year success that then turns to be an overnight success? So few thoughts, but if I may, I would like to invite 2 persons on a stage who know more of this than I do. So first, I would like to invite Ashish Vaswani. So Ashish was actually the original writer of the Attention is All You Need paper, which invented the transformers, so the large language models. Welcome, Ashish. And nowadays a successful entrepreneur. And then I would like to invite Umesh Sachdev. And Umesh is running a company called Uniphore in March's portfolio, which focuses on customer technology. So welcome, Umesh. So thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
So, and we're going to open the panel for Q&A a bit later on. So if you have any questions, please hold on to those for a couple minutes. So if I may, Umesh, you started Uniphore in 2008.
That's right.
Which seems like a lifetime ago, or maybe even a couple lifetimes ago. And you did not start as a technology company. So can you maybe highlight to the audience a bit the journey you've been on?
Well, Larry, in 2008, which was 16 years ago, people find it funny now when I say we founded a conversational AI company back then. The very first investment that we were making developing something was a speech-to-text, text-to-speech, natural language processing type area. It was not called conversational AI then. And the reason we were doing it, the company was founded in India, and we were after a thesis that the base of the pyramid citizen in India would find it hard to access the internet, because the internet is in the English language and largely by then accessed on the browser. And because of lack of literacy, we were excluding 700-800 million people from that digital revolution. So our hypothesis, our foresight back then was, let's use conversational AI of today and make the information, transaction, and services of the internet accessible through vernacular language, through this technology. But in these 16 years, if you kind of watch how we've evolved, where today we are a true multimodal AI platform with computer vision, with voice in over 100 languages and text, all on the same platform. It kind of mirrors how this area of machine learning and deep learning and then transformers and now generative models, how AI has evolved over these 16 years.
Can you give a bit of statistics maybe to the audience on what is the company's ARR, how many customers you have?
Absolutely. We today serve about 1,600 enterprises around the world. These are Fortune 1000. We do business in 20 different countries. But the thing we are most proud in these companies that we serve, whether they're banks or telecom companies or retailers, we have 750,000 of their employees who every day come to work. And they use one of the workflows from Uniphore. Either it's a co-pilot or a chatbot or an automation bot in different domains. The company, Uniphore is 170 million plus contracted ARR, growing at a little over 70% year on year. And it's just fascinating for us how the pre-GPT era, which was 18 months ago, versus the post-GPT era, and what it's done to my customers and how they think about AI very differently today than they were thinking 2 years ago.
So before we get to the GPT era, just a question. It's fascinating you started in 2008. Back in 2008, I think AWS already existed, but nobody really talked about cloud. But you've gone through multiple generational tech changes, but you also gone through, I guess, a business model pivot to more towards a SaaS model from licensing model and so forth. So tell us a bit, what are the learnings from those pivots you've done?
Well, you lead me to a very important point, Larry. Nothing to do with AI, but 2008, as you say, from a technology industry standpoint, very different period. I remember we were raising our Series A 5 or 6 years into the existence of the company, raising $4 or $5 million back then. And I remember us getting a term sheet where the investors saying we have a precondition with the term sheet that software businesses in the West have adopted this new business model, and it's called software as a service. And we said, well, that seems like an equal monthly installment scheme. So as opposed to selling licenses, we can move to a monthly billing. It's an easier sale process. Why not? And that was a pivot. Our other pivot was, when we started expanding geographically and we moved our headquarters to Silicon Valley, et cetera. And all of those pivots, whether it was technology, business model, or anything directionally that we were doing in the company, has led to, in those occasions, one or the other near-death experiences for the company, because none of those transitions, none of those pivots, irrespective of scale, are natural or easy to the DNA of a team, DNA of a company. And so if there's one learning, whether a new platform shift occurs, like GenAI is now out there, or AGI is the next step, or something else occurs, is how do you constantly prepare for this transition? How do you stay ahead of the curve? How do you keep your company at different stages in life prepared? Because 16 years is a very long time. We're talking about AI today. It's a whole lifetime in the era of technology.
Ashish, talking about era of technology, so you had, I think, once-in-a-lifetime privilege in 2017 of writing the paper you did. So tell us a bit, what did world look like back then, and what were your beliefs when you guys came out with the paper on what it could result in?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is the world was less crowded then, it's as a scientist in Google Brain, it was doing that deep work, which was largely uncharted land, and discovering these new techniques was a lot of fun. But I guess things are really working now, and I guess the beliefs then. Deep learning had already started. Deep learning, when I joined Google Brain, I did early work in language models here at USC in Marina Del Rey. And when I went to Brain, we were all convinced that deep learning was actually we were going to get a lot of practical benefit, or we're going to solve a lot of problems in machine learning with deep learning. And the transformer there was a certain irreverence to thinking about how to generate language, and the transformer was a new technique, and we were all just very excited about building something new, a new way of different from the models that existed in the past. And I guess. And since then, what's not surprising, and I mentioned this earlier today, was what's not surprising is that the transformer has impacted a lot of fields. That was very evident when, at least working on it for a while, it was very clear to me that the impact was going to transcend machine translation. What was I think surprising to many, and also probably what resulted, I guess the transformer resulted in a Cambrian explosion in machine learning, but GPT and ChatGPT led to the Cambrian explosion in AI, right? And scale and training on colossal amounts of data could pack so many capabilities and so much knowledge inside a single machine that would ultimately kind of make machine learning easy for everyone. That was interesting. That was new. So many capabilities in one box that you could just elicit by talking.
And coming to today, and I talked to the audience about big figures, 500 billion, et cetera, which in some ways is so big it's hard to comprehend. Can you really put in a nutshell on where are we today in terms of technological capabilities, and what would you compare it to? Just to give the audience a bit of a feel on what you think can be done with what is there today.
It's funny, one of the things that comes to mind is that it's still lower than the number of parameters that we're likely using in our largest models. But it's not, I mean, I guess we should have more dollars per parameter that we spend to train on, yes. But I think that, so we've gotten to the point where now we can kind of solve new tasks by giving some demonstrations in context, right? It's called few-shot learning or in-context learning, and we can do that successfully for code and for language. But where the models are deficient today, and where there's this elusive, the elusive capability is how can we just watch humans perform tasks in a computer and start mimicking them, start automating some of their workflows, and start automating some workflows in the enterprise by just watching people perform tasks. For example, an IT agent as they're solving issues. Hey, I see you constantly actually performing these steps. How about I automate this for you? Or a lawyer, hey, I see you actually citing these sources for these kinds of briefs. How about if I automate this process for you? So this ability to watch humans use tools like software tools or take actions and start mimicking them is still missing. And I think that scientifically, technically, this is an inevitability. I think within 10 years, we will have the ability to actually build models that can quickly, learning from a few demonstrations of how we're performing a task, learn to interact with us and automate and eventually become custodians of most of the workflow.
You used earlier, we were having a lunch conversation with Ashish, and Ashish used the term that the moment today is comparable to when humans learn to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to use it, but I did use it now with the audience.
I mean, I think that we already overhype AI in the short term and underhype it in the long term. So that statement would have contributed to overhyping it in the short term. But machines learned to talk. They were, AI became conversational, and so I think that definitely helped us to easily define, to ask the model to do what we want, and the machines were able to converse back, and that definitely led to an easier way to access capabilities. I think that played a role. But the surprising bit here is that scale and training on vast amounts of data packed so many knowledge and skill, so much knowledge and just capabilities into one, and blending them together was very easy. I mean, an example is robotics, right? So, who knew that you could just take a language model and the robot just becomes the eyes and the hands, and the language model becomes the brain? With SeiCan and a lot of these recent approaches, there's been a revival in robotics, and and who knew that training large language models that packed so many, that the language models would actually have the model of the world and the semantics to actually help you build better robots. That's interesting, right?
It is fascinating.
That's surprising, yeah.
Let's turn to business. So, again, 500 billion opportunity. Maybe, Umesh, a question for you. So you've successfully acquired 1,600 customers, as you said. What are some of the learnings on how do you actually scale a business that is aimed towards enterprises, and what does it take?
Well, the cool thing, Lari, in the last 18 months is AI now is a boardroom topic. It gets discussed in every board meeting in large and small companies, which now has made it the CIO's prerogative. And what that has done is it's given the license to the CIO of an enterprise to say, all our software spend in SaaS companies, vertical SaaS, et cetera, please stop. Because I've been told by the board I need to act and create a strategy for the company. So scale, if you think about it, prior to GPT, AI was being applied in specific business applications, call centers, sales, marketing, et cetera, very verticalized. Now, if there's anyone here who is both panicked by AI, but also you think you want to move fast, but don't know enough, you want to read, the one place to start is please read the EU Act on AI. It surprised me how very few people have read the EU Act. The EU Act is putting the onus on the output of those AI models, not on the model developers like OpenAI or Google, but on the enterprise that ends up using it. And that has made every single CEO, every single CIO that I meet, and on a weekly basis, I'm speaking to 3 or 4 of my customers at the C-suite, they're very nervous. They want to make decisions for the future, knowing that every 48 hours, something new is coming out. And so scale is both inevitable, but at the same time, there are friction to it. Let me pick a couple of examples. One industry that I'm intimately aware of is the customer service industry, call centers. We all have experienced dialing 1-800 numbers in our lifetime. There are 15 million people who man call centers in the world today, all right? And what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, just in the next 3 to 5 years, the way to think about that is the following. I think of it as a pyramid. The top of the pyramid is what I call the elimination of customer service. If you know that a customer is likely to face trouble before the customer picks up the phone and dials a 1-800 number or chats or emails, AI can predict that and eliminate the need. I'll give you an example. You're at a retail store. You're at the checkout counter. Your card didn't go through. AI predicts you're now going to reach out. There's a proactive SMS or a text message or something on your app which says, look, your card didn't go through. This is a buy now, pay later situation. Move on. So about 30% of the current customer support opportunity can get completely eliminated by AI. That's the top of the pyramid. Then let's come to the middle of the pyramid, which is what I call deflection. All right? You still need to speak to somebody, but now because of language models, et cetera, and over 100 global languages, you can interface on chat or voice or video with an AI bot without having to wait in a queue for the human. And so another 30% of traffic can be now deflected to AI. So we're down to 50% of today's traffic, where even in our lifetime, we are still likely to need an empathetic human voice on the other side. However, even this 50%, there is an opportunity for an AI copilot assisting the call center rep. So as you're talking on the phone, AI is working behind the scenes, and you're never put on hold, because the AI is solving the problem while the human voice is giving you comfort. None of these 3 layers are waiting for something to happen in technology or something futuristic. We are today experiencing call elimination, call deflection, and copilots all together, which means in the next 3 to 5 years, one industry that employs 15 million workers is likely to see upwards of 70% efficiency because of AI. That's about 300 billion of spend. Going to your point, where are those numbers going to come from? $500 billion. I'm making it easier for the group to understand. And this is happening today, which is why for the last 6-8 months, I've been on a plane every week trying to stay close to my customers, because they are changing their strategy at a pace that we have not seen before. And the pace of innovation, that's the one thing that has accelerated thanks to the white paper this gentleman wrote, and all the innovation that came out of that, is that industry's adoption, pace of innovation, and now impact cycle.
And how do you, so your ARR today is about 100 million.
170.
170. Mm-hmm. Impressive growth. It was 100 million last time I checked, so very impressive. How do you gain credibility? Because still, on an enterprise scale, you are a relatively small provider. So
yes, we are.
How do you make sure that you actually get to the C-suite, they take a risk with Uniphore? Any learnings there?
That's a very interesting question. If you think about the old adage, when I started my career in software, I was taught nobody got fired for buying IBM. All right? And in today's world, that feels like nobody will get fired if you partner with the Google or Microsoft or OpenAI. That's where you're leading me. Which is why I come back to please read the EU Act. The first bullet point on the EU Act is putting the onus of training that model and putting governance on the data that was used to train that model on the enterprise. So if you use a third-party model, which is a black box by one of these hyperscalers, the enterprise is in non-compliance of the first bullet point of the EU Act, all right? And as CIOs begin to recognize this, then they say, who else is in this space? Well, there are a lot of early-stage startups who have yet to prove ground. And we internally say we're in a club of one. We are not in the early stages where you don't know if this company will survive. We are a pre-IPO company which has raised over $600 million of capital, 170 million, 1,600 customers. There is probably no new industry which meets me today and says, Umesh, how do I use Gen AI, without me saying, here's 50 other customers in your industry who've used Gen AI with us or other forms of AI, and here are ROI stories. By the way, pick up the phone and talk to 10 of them, and they'll tell you what they experienced, what was the journey like, what were the pitfalls, but here are the business outcomes for that. And so the opportunity, if you ask me, Larry, yes, we're not a hyperscaler, but I think that's a good thing today. As we establish credibility, not because of who we are, but because of what the outcome of AI is going to be for that enterprise, we are beginning to see Fortune 100 customers.
I love it. It's the proof of concept, the proof of value.
Absolutely. There is nothing more important in today's world, because you know this. Wall Street, your presentation said it, is rewarding companies which are coming at the earnings call and delivering key results with AI. Klarna just last week said 700 people worth of work of customer service was done by AI models. And the companies that are not able to report business impact by AI, just announce a partnership here or there, their stock price is taking a beating. So the proof of value is coming, the pressure is coming from Wall Street, that please come in your next quarterly cycle and deliver proof of value with AI. Otherwise, you will not be rewarded for your AI strategy.
Excellent. Very inspiring, Umesh. Ashish, you're at a different stage. So Essential AI, if I remember, was established about a year ago. And you're focusing on foundational technology to automate the corporate workflow. So tell us a bit like, how are you thinking about the world and the next 2 years ahead of you from the vantage point you have?
Right. So a lot of, so there's two parts to the biggest, there's two groups of, or there's two directions for us, right? We have to move forward in both those directions. One is the technical, the scientific, right? So understanding what is missing in today's models, for example, I recently heard from a leading law firm that these models are unable to learn my preferences of how I prepare a brief. From another a VC firm that these models actually fail when I want to do complex document processing, right? And one so it's eventually, if we actually want, if we want, the platonic ideal is we want to have models that can very quickly watch watch knowledge workers or anyone in an enterprise demonstrate some, they watch them do tasks and mimic them. Working backwards from there, right? What are the questions are, what are the steps in between, right? And one place where we're starting is, what are the capabilities that are missing in today's models that is eventually going to allow enterprises to adapt these models for their needs? And that in turn will actually help us understand, okay, how do we understand their preferences? How do we fine tune the models, say, for their preferences, right? Eventually, how can we make it easy for them to fine tune? And how reason over, or do multi-step reasoning where these models are actually failing today. So we're kind of at that stage. And so what is the next set of capabilities that we need to build that will unlock more value for our users, right? And the second challenge for us, actually, I guess, I'll quote Hilbert, when a mathematician, he said that the art of mathematics is finding the simplest problem that has the seeds of generality. So it's essentially identifying these use cases where we can find the 8th grades, the grade school mathematics version of the problem today, and then after 6 months you can get to more and more complex workflows. So we're trying to find partners that we can work with together on building these capabilities. And ultimately we will want to get, so in 2 years we will want to get to a point that for some of the light cone of use cases that we're working in, we're able to generalize these models in new environments very quickly. So we deploy our model, and within a week or so of onboarding, the model's actually able to take up like 30% of your workload. And it's just learning for you. It's your model. It's evolving on your behalf. You have the ability to give it feedback, you have the ability to even red team it, check what's wrong, control hallucination. And so then it's your company's brain. And so what are the capabilities that we need today? What are the use cases that we actually believe is going to give us this, which we can solve today, and there's a ladder of there's a ladder of complexity there. So that's
it almost sounds like there's great synergies that James has created in March Capital's portfolio, because Umesh, you're very focused on the customer. How do we get there? How do we radiate? I think, Ashish, you're developing amazing technology, so clear synergies there.
I hope so, yeah.
Let me give the floor to the audience. We have few minutes. Any questions to the esteemed colleagues? Gentleman there in the corner, please. Mic doesn't work, but we'll hear you.
Hello?
Perfect.
Ashish, this is a question for you. In terms of training these models, from a vector embeddings perspective, how far do you think we've come, and how much work remains to be done before we're able to see company-specific stuff not flow back into the foundation models?
So that's a great question. How far we've come. So I would say that most of the success that we've seen in these models depends on what they already know, right? The robotics example that I gave the world, the models know so general information about the affordances in the world, and they're able to understand the world and use these constraints to guide robots to actually perform tasks, right? But they barely know what's actually happening inside the enterprise. What makes or what are the myriad of the 130,000 IT tickets that Disney cares that Disney actually wants to resolve, or how to write briefs. I would say that it's a question of data, and it's a question of deploying and then getting feedback. There are some capabilities that are actually missing on this multi-step reasoning. So we'd have to. So I would say that it's a matter. I would say that. If we deploy models today within enterprises, get their data, then we can already go much farther than what the open source models can, because it's getting feedback, live feedback from users for the tasks that they care about. And so, and then over time, as we use them more and more, as our capabilities improve on how these models plan and reason, we can solve more and more complex tasks. And actually, another very, very important component here is the interface. Many people argue that ChatGPT was just an interface, and a scientist will concede, but it was actually an interface that was learned. The model has learned to parcel out pieces of information. So what are the right interfaces for workflows? How do we even understand what are the actions that people are taking? How do we understand their intent and goals as they're actually navigating or as they're performing, as they're sort of using the computer? And is a question of the interface too, so we'll have to figure out interfaces as well. But I believe that if you deploy this within enterprises, they will quickly learn from feedback and outperform existing models as they are without any training. And regarding keeping your data private, it's what at least Essential cares about, or what is the feedback that we care about from enterprises, is the different tasks in which they're used and where the limitations today are, so that we can go back on our side, do the R&D to advance these capabilities. None of your data or your enterprise-specific data should be shared, but it's the failure cases that we care about, so that we may augment these models with these capabilities and improve them. And so the next time, the first time we deploy, there's going to be a lot of cost of actually deploying, making these models work, but then that's going to amortize over time as we go back and update our models with these better and better capabilities. I hope that answers some of the questions.
I can add here. I think the question in itself is pointing out to the audience a big opportunity. We can all agree, given how fast these models are evolving, open source, proprietary, models are likely to get commoditized. The big moat opportunity here is the data moat. All right? So like Ashish was saying, it's what did you train this model on? If you train it on the internet data and your vector embeddings were done from publicly available data, now you expose it to a financial services who cares about CFPB compliance and regulatory compliance. Of course, out of the box, the model doesn't deliver, because it doesn't know what CFPB compliance is, et cetera. But as the cost of training these models will start to come down. As Larry's timeline of AI native companies start to emerge, companies have an opportunity to train these models grounds up on enterprise data, anonymized, et cetera. And the models that emerge, which get exposed to a lot of enterprise use cases, whether it's in a single vertical or a cluster of verticals, will out of the box solve what's called the cold start problem, which is what you're referring to. That before you need my data, out of the box, can you please start delivering some value? And we deal with this all day long. We are an AI company with a SaaS business model.
Excellent.
Right?
Ashish, Umesh, thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I think this discussion could continue on many vectors, to many directions, and however long we would like, but really, really appreciate your time. I think for the audience, I hope you enjoyed it. If there's one thing to take out of this, is that the opportunity is big. I think we all believe that the opportunity is also real, that we are beyond the hype cycle, although it feels like hype cycle. So thank you for your time, everyone. And thank you, Ashish and Umesh.
Thank you, Larry.